Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you could join us. I know that there have been some difficulties there in your area, and I hate to hear that. Um, but we'll get through the presentation, and then I hope things work out there for you. I want to thank Ms. Mathern for inviting me to speak to you this evening about the student financial aid process. My name is Ann Carmichael, and I hope by the end of this presentation you have a better understanding of the process. As I'm sure Ms. Mathern has already mentioned to you, the Louisiana Department of Education asks that the class of 2021 submit the free application for federal student aid as a requirement for graduation this year. And this simply ensures that your money is ready and waiting for you when you begin college in the fall. Because college can be expensive, it's time to start thinking about some of those expenses and making some plans on how you're going to pay for them. Those costs are going to include your equipment, books and supplies, personal expenses, room and board, which can include your dorm room, or if you're living off campus, perhaps your apartment. Um, and then you would have to include your living expenses as well. And then tuition and fees, such as your parking, library, technology, athletic fees. And these fees really add up. So when you're doing your research and you're checking colleges for their tuition costs, always take into consideration all of these expenses. They are a bit more than they're advertised on the school's websites. But the good news is that financial aid is available from the federal government, our state government, your college or career school, and then nonprofit and private organizations. And every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in federal student aid. A lot of that does go unawarded, and we just want to make sure that you are getting your portion. Types of federal student aid include the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, or the TEACH Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, federal work study, and then direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. And I want to mention to you as I go through the presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Zoom chat box, and we're going to discuss them afterwards. Remember that federal grants are a form of financial aid that does not have to be repaid. So you never want to turn down a grant on your financial aid offer. The grant family includes the Pell Grants, and these are for undergraduates with financial need. FSEOGs are for undergraduates with exceptional financial need. And then your service grants for students of military parents who died defending the country following 9/11, and TEACH grants for students pursuing a teaching career. Now, the Federal Work Study Program provides part-time jobs to help pay for your education expenses. So when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested in federal work study, you're going to be considered for some of these jobs. Now, this is a FAFSA question. You are asked if you're interested. You can answer yes, no, or I don't know. But if you do select yes, please know that this does not obligate you to accept any jobs on campus, but there are a variety of jobs there, and it looks great on your resume when you graduate. These earnings are paid directly to the student and then can be used to pay for some of those miscellaneous expenses. Direct subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is charged until you graduate or cease to attend. However, there is another type of student loan, and it is the unsubsidized direct loan. Everyone's eligible for this loan, but interest does begin to accrue Once the loan is fully dispersed, which is usually in the spring semester, and then throughout your college career, which if you're going to be going to a 4-year college, add those 4 years of interest plus the 15-year repayment period once you graduate. So the interest does begin to add up. So be careful about accepting student loans. And there is a big difference, as you can see, between the subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Um, when you do receive your reward offer, you are going to want to tell yourself that the U and unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest on that type of loan. So always exhaust the subsidized portion first. Now, if you're going to a pricier college, you could also be offered private student loans. Just make sure that you are accepting all of the federal loans first, because payments aren't due on your federal loans until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed at a lower rate, and no credit check is required. This type of loan is also only in the student's name. But with private loans, lenders are going to require that payments be made while the student is still in school. The interest rate might be variable and it's often quite a bit higher, and they almost always require a cosigner. So student, you would, with a private loan, have to go to a parent or someone else with established credit and ask them to also be responsible for repayment of this type of loan in case you can't make those payments. So you can see, to dispel the myth, almost everyone is eligible for some type of federal student aid. All federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, which launched on October 1st and does so every year. And you must renew your FAFSA every year you're in college. Student financial aid is awarded on a first come, first served basis. So submit your FAFSA as soon as possible. And we've received word that already 1 million students have submitted FAFSAs for this upcoming academic year. So make sure you're getting to the head of the line while the money is still available, so you'll be offered the maximum award that you're eligible to receive. Remember to pay close attention to and meet your FAFSA deadlines. You'll have deadlines from your college. There will be state deadlines. There is a TOPS scholarship FAFSA date deadline. There are deadlines from Federal Student Aid, and I know that your counselor has talked to you about the date that she is requesting you submit your FAFSA to meet your graduation requirement. Now, you want to begin the FAFSA process by collecting all of the documents that you need to complete the form. And if you have everything in front of you when you began, the process should take no longer than 30 minutes. These documents include the student and parents' Social Security cards, the 2019 federal income tax returns for the student and parents if they filed, W-2s, because sometimes there's information on the W-2 that is not reported on the federal income tax return itself, and then bank statements and records of investments, because you're going to be asked to report the balances of these accounts as of the date that you submit your FAFSA. Begin by creating the Federal Student Aid ID, or the FSA ID, because this allows the student and his parent to identify themselves electronically when accessing Federal Student Aid websites, such as the FAFSA. Each student and one parent will create an ID using only their personal email addresses and mobile phone numbers. Don't share information on your FSA ID. In other words, don't use your mom or dad's mobile phone number as your alternate number when asked, because that's considered shared information, and you're going to have trouble signing your FAFSA. So if you don't have an alternate phone number, just leave that field blank. Now, your FSA ID username and password is legally binding. It's your official electronic signature. So make sure that you're recording it and keeping it in a very safe place. You'll need it every year that you submit your FAFSA. If you don't have access to a computer, download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile phone or any other mobile device with internet access. Or if you prefer, you can use the web-based version at fafsa.gov. Now, it's important to note, you can begin the FAFSA on your mobile app, save your work, later pick up and use the web-based version. Everything will be integrated after it identifies your FSA ID. You'll begin your FAFSA by logging in with the student's FSA ID username and password, because the FAFSA is the student's application for Federal Student Aid. The parent ID is going to come in later if the parent chooses to transfer his tax information into the FAFSA from the IRS, and then you'll use it again to sign your child's FAFSA. The high school class of 2021 should complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA, because that's the academic year that you're applying for financial aid. The 2020-2021 FAFSA is for college students that are in college this academic year. There are 8 sections that must be completed before submitting your FAFSA, and those include the student demographics, where you'll be asked to provide your social security number, your name, date of birth, email address, physical address, residency status, and your gender. And notice over toward the top of the page here, you see a blue ribbon that says student information. Every time you move from one page to the next, you're going to be told whose information you're providing. Then you have the school selection section, where you're going to report the name of your high school, the colleges that you want your FAFSA data to be sent to, and your housing plans on each of those campuses. You'll move over into the dependency status. This is more information they're asking of the student. The student will be asked to consider 10 questions to determine whether he's a dependent or an independent student. And we'll talk about those 10 questions in just a moment. You'll be asked to report the number of dependents living in the student's household and the parent's education. Now, parents often ask why they're being asked their level of education in the student's FAFSA. But it's important to remember that there could be additional financial aid available on your college campus if you are a first-generation college student. So make sure you're answering that question appropriately. Next, you move over into the parent and then the student's financial sections, where they're going to be asking you to report your working wages from 2019 and list any federal benefits that you received. You'll also report your savings and investment balances in this section. Then it's time to sign and submit your FAFSA using your FSA IDs. Once you do, your confirmation page will pop up, and we'll go over that in a bit as well. But as you move through the FAFSA, if you need clarification, click on that question mark over to the right-hand side of each question. There are hyperlinks provided that you can click on, and they'll give you a more detailed description of the question. Or you can request a FAFSA online chat, call Federal Student Aid, or call Leela's FAFSA helpline. But for this section, I'm only going to cover the most commonly asked FAFSA questions. If I don't cover something that you are interested in learning more about, Just ask her question down in the chat box below. You can email me or call the FAFSA helpline and we'll work with you individually. And I'll provide my contact information toward the end of the presentation. The citizenship requirement is often asked about. The student must be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. And if you're not quite sure what an eligible non-citizen is, this is one of the hyperlinks. You can take a look there and see if you qualify. Now, if the student is an eligible non-citizen or a citizen, but his parents are not, those parents will enter zeros anywhere their social security numbers are asked for. Young men between the ages of 18 and 26 must register with Selective Service to be eligible for any type of federal benefits. And because grants, work study, and student loans that are administered by Federal Student Aid are federal benefits, you should be registered. Now, if you haven't already done so and you wish to, you can register within the FAFSA by saying, please register me. And once you turn 18, you'll be automatically registered with Selective Service. Now, you are not required to register with Selective Service. However, if you are not registered, you will not be considered for Federal Student Aid and you will have to pay out of pocket for your education. It's important to note that only colleges that you list in the school selection section of the FAFSA will consider you for Federal Student Aid. They're not just going to send your personal and financial information out to every college in the country. They need your permission. So add all of the colleges that you're considering, even if you haven't completed your admissions requirements at those colleges. The college will hold on to your FAFSA data until you apply for admission, and at that time, they will begin considering you for Federal Student Aid. Now, you can add up to 10 colleges at a time. If you're planning to apply to more than 10 colleges, there's a hyperlink on this page that gives you further instructions on how to do so. Now, we've gotten to the most often asked question, whether you're a dependent or independent student. So you're going to be asked to consider these questions, and I'll quickly go over them. Will the student be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which he's applying for financial aid? So these questions are being asked of the student. Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree? Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children or a spouse who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? So those of you that are planning to go on into the military, boot camp and basic training is considered training. So you still will be considered a dependent student for FAFSA purposes. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13, were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care? Or were you a ward or dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor? Or are you in legal guardianship as determined by a court? And you can get further information within the FAFSA as to what those terms mean. But I will tell you that there is a difference between legal custody and legal guardianship. So make sure you have all of your documents with you as you're answering these questions. Then the last, are you an unaccompanied youth who is homeless, or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If you can answer yes to just one of these questions and provide a legal document supporting your claim, then you're considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes and will not be required to provide parental information. Everyone else is going to be considered dependent and must provide a parent's information. Now, for FAFSA purposes, unfortunately, you're not considered independent simply because you file your own taxes or you support yourself. If you do find yourself in that situation, but you can't answer yes to one of the prior questions, you can contact your financial aid office. They might be able to make some adjustments for you. Who is my parent when I fill out the FAFSA? The parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. So if you live with both of your biological parents, then that's simple, just list both of them. But if you live with a parent who is divorced, separated, or was never married, you will list only that biological parent on your FAFSA. Now, if that parent is remarried, you must now report that parent and his or her spouse. In other words, Federal Student Aid is trying to get an idea of the financial standing of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to the date that the FAFSA was submitted. If you're identified as a dependent student, but your parents refuse to provide their information on your FAFSA, you can go ahead and submit by stating I'm unable to provide information about my parents and I don't have a special circumstance. I can't answer one of the 10 questions in the dependency status section. But it's very important that when you submit your FAFSA without parental information, that you contact the college's financial aid office to discuss your situation. Because if you don't, you're only going to be offered federal student loans, and you want to make sure you're being considered for all student aid. Remember that this is your responsibility to contact the financial aid office. They're not going to just assume that you need some additional assistance. Now, to expedite the processing of your federal student aid, the student and parents are encouraged to use the Internal Revenue Data Retrieval tool if they filed a return in 2019. This is going to really streamline the process. The financial aid office is not going to have to verify your manually entered income information, which they are required to by law if you don't use the IRS data retrieval tool. Now, if you have trouble with this tool, and I work with 2 or 3 students and parents every day because they're having some issues, please feel free to call Leela's FAFSA helpline or Federal Student Aid directly, and we can help you get through that section. Once you do decide to use the data retrieval tool, you'll be taken directly into the irs.gov website, where you'll want to take a look at your 2019 income tax return, and you want to mimic exactly what's on that return on this page, because the IRS wants to make sure that the person who filed that return is the person on their site, and they do that by making sure you have a copy of your own return. Now, say you've moved, that's fine, but the IRS wants the address that was used to file that return. Say your tax preparer misspelled your name, that can cause some trouble linking to the IRS. They want exactly what's printed on that return. And then you're almost finished with your FAFSA. But before you sign and submit it, you really need to take a look at your student aid report. This report is going to reflect every question you're asked and every answer you gave. If you do find that there's an error in one of your answers, this is a good time to go back into the FAFSA to that section and make that correction, because a review of this report ensures that the financial aid office receives the most accurate information so they can timely process your aid. Then it's time to sign. So the student, as you can see, and one parent will use their FSA IDs to sign the FAFSA. If you submit your FAFSA without signatures, the FAFSA is going to be considered incomplete, and the processing of your financial aid will be on hold until you sign and submit. Once you do, you'll want to review the confirmation page, which pops up immediately after submitting. And this is the only time you're going to get this much in-depth information. So I encourage you to print it or take a screenshot of it, because although you're going to be sent an email confirming that Federal Student Aid received your FAFSA, you're not going to see it in this great of detail. So on this page, you'll find out the steps you need to take next to complete the FAFSA process, a list of the colleges that are going to receive your FAFSA data. You can review your estimated expected family contribution and consider your financial aid estimates. And I'm going to emphasize that because everyone gets excited when they see the dollar amounts, but please be aware that these are only estimates. Every college financial aid office must verify the information that you've submitted. They are required to do that by the U.S. Department of Education, and they are the ones who are going to determine the aid on their campuses. You will be hearing from them about your financial aid offer, not Federal Student Aid. Now, if you begin a FAFSA and you submit it without completing it, or you submit it without signatures, you're going to receive timely reminders that you need to take some action. So always follow through with this so that your aid can be processed as soon as possible. You might have to go make some corrections or sign and resubmit. But once your FAFSA is fully processed, you'll receive a note from Federal Student Aid telling you so, and then they'll share it with the colleges that you've listed on the FAFSA. Every college financial aid office will begin to identify any aid that you might be eligible to receive. If your family's financial situation has changed since 2019, remember to contact the financial aid office because they have the ability to adjust your aid by using what they call professional judgment. So say one or both parents have lost jobs or have a reduction in work hours, or there have been some unexpected medical expenses. The financial aid office will take all of this into consideration, and they may be able to offer you some grant money. Your net price is going to be determined by each college by subtracting any grants and scholarships that you're eligible for from your cost of attendance. The net price can then be paid in cash or by accepting student loans to pay that balance. Your student financial aid offer, although they're not going to all look the same, it's going to reflect each college's cost of attendance and any grants, scholarship, work study, or student loans that they are going to offer you. And remember, you're going to be receiving a financial aid offer from every college that you've sent your FAFSA data to. So read over these offers and consider them carefully. Hopefully you're applying to several colleges, so you have some options. We have often seen private colleges offer full rides to students, where a public college, a student might come out with some student loan balances. So make sure that you're keeping your options open. And remember that you're going to get a separate letter from every school. So act on any requests that they might ask of you, and get that done timely so they can process your aid. Accept your financial aid in this order: scholarships and grants. This is gift aid, so you don't have to pay this back. Federal work study is earned money. So there's no reason for that to have to be repaid. And then finally, your student loans. Remember that this is borrowed money and that you must repay it with interest. Now, Leela offers a free FAFSA completion guide and workbook for the class of 2021. So if you haven't already received your electronic copy, you can email me and I'll be happy to send that over to you. But it's going to discuss in detail the financial aid process. And I'll also include a senior checklist for college planning to help you stay on track this year. Let's talk about scholarships for just a minute. I know your counselor probably tells you about scholarships weekly. You all know that this is gift aid, right? It doesn't have to be repaid, and there are thousands of them, and they're offered by schools and your parents' employers, community organizations, and social and religious groups. Some are merit-based, and some are based on financial need. A scholarship could cover the entire cost of your tuition, or it could be a one-time award of a few $100s. But either way, it's going to reduce the cost of your education. So apply to as many as you can. Talk to your counselor or your college financial aid counselor for ideas on aid that they know about. This year, Leela is offering 2 scholarship opportunities. One is for Louisiana high school seniors who've completed their FAFSA, and you can find the details out at leela.org. You'll also be able to grab that scholarship application. There's no essay, there's not much asked of you, just to complete your FAFSA. And then for those of you who have older siblings already in college, Leela offers a $1,000 Choose Louisiana scholarship for students attending a college in the state of Louisiana. Now, for students that are going to a college and they may have already accepted all of the grants and scholarships and federal and state dollars that they can, and they need additional funds to help pay for school, Leela does offer a nonprofit private loan. So if you're interested, you can find out about that at leelachoice.org. Now is the time to ask those questions. So I'm going to put up my contact information here. You'll see our FAFSA helpline and my email address. I'm going to switch over here and take a look at the chat box. All right. If I have an older child already in college and I already have an FSA ID, do I use the same ID for both students? Yes, you do, because it's your electronic signature. It's going to follow you throughout the life of any student loans you might have as a parent, and then to help your students through the Federal Student Aid process as well. Also, my older child will finish her undergrad in 2 years and start pharmacy school in the fall of 2021. She will not have a bachelor's yet, but will be in graduate school. Do I check graduate school for her? And does that now make her an independent student? And what a great question. Yes, you'll be glad to know that your child that's going on to pharmacy school, which is considered graduate school, will now be independent. All right, and if an independent student is only my child's tax information now needed for my older child in graduate school? If an independent, I think what you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that your information, including your income information and tax information, is only going to be reported on your student who's going to be an undergraduate. And that's yes. The parent does not have to provide any information on the student if he's independent. All right. Oh, and Miss Nathern is on with us, and she says to tell you that she has posted an electronic copy of Leela's FAFSA booklet on your senior Google Classroom and on her Moodle page. So make sure that you are checking those. She said she can also post it on the high school website as well. So you have plenty of opportunities to get those. And let me see, I might have another question right here. Has anybody already started the FAFSA, but perhaps they're just not, they're having a problem and being held up somewhere? Or has anybody already submitted the FAFSA? Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to share? Let me check this one more time and see if we've covered everything. If parents are divorced, living in two different states, do I have to list all of his dad's 401k? Okay, that is a good question because think about this. If you are divorced from your spouse, only your information is going to be reported on the FAFSA. So you do not have to report dad's information since the student is not living in his household. Does that make sense? If the parents are divorced living in two different places, do I have to list all of dad's 401k? Nope, you do not. You guys have some great questions. Sometimes I do these presentations and I know it's a lot of information to absorb, so people will contact me after the fact, or maybe they're just not sure where to get started, what to ask. Oh, Ms. Mathern is saying that a lot of seniors have already submitted your FAFSA, and that is great. Now, you all can see that this is a tedious process. And you have one, perhaps a few moms on here have two FAFSAs to submit, but I want you to thank your counselor because she is responsible for making sure all of you submit your FAFSAs. So give her a thank you as well. Oh, you're getting some thank yous, Miss Laverne. Here's a good question. My daughter has not received any scholarship information yet. Has she missed this due to the hybrid situation? I would encourage you to contact Ms. Mathern. I'm sure she is more than happy to tell you where that information can be found. She may have already sent it, and maybe perhaps you didn't receive it yet. But just give Ms. Mathern a call or contact her via email. Anyone else? Anybody want to talk about any scholarships they've received so far or where they're going to college? All right. Well, it was great. It was great to be with you guys, and good luck to you. And I hope everything works out with this horrible storm that's moved through your area. So take care, and I look forward to receiving your FAFSA scholarship submissions.